Welcome back to Firebox Print Studio. My name's Diane, and in this video we're going to look at paper. What it is, what different types of paper you're going to come across in the studio, how to prepare it for printing, and also how to handle it. Paper and paper making is an art and science all in its own right, and full disclosure here, I've never made paper myself. It's been one of those things that's been on my bucket list for a long time, but I've never actually got around to it yet. But as an artist and fine art printer, having a basic understanding of what paper is, I think is essential to your practice, considering it's one of the main mediums that we print on. Now, I think it's safe to assume that we're all pretty familiar with what paper is. It's that thin material we write on, print on, wrap things in. But it's what that paper is made of, which is of most importance to us here in fine art printing. Now, paper is composed of cellulose. And cellulose is extracted from a variety of plant-based materials. In order to extract the usable cellulose from those plant-based materials in some cases, it's necessary to physically grind it and chemically process it to remove the impurities. Now, it's this processing which directly impacts the longevity and strength of the papers. The most common paper you'll probably come across is this type of paper here. Now, the raw material to make this type of paper is actually wood pulp. And wood pulp only contains between 40 to 50% cellulose. So in order to extract the usable cellulose from this wood pulp paper, the fibres have to be both physically and chemically treated. These processes damage and weaken the paper fibres, which is why you'll find, in time, these papers here will turn brittle and crack and discolour with age. Now, I'm not saying there's no place for wood pulp paper in a printmaking studio. It has several uses. But it should never be used to print your final artwork. When we print our artwork, we want it to last for hundreds of years, not just a handful. So that's why you'll find a lot of fine art prints are printed on a type of paper which is called rag paper. Now, rag paper got its name from the fact that it used to be made of rags, cotton rags. Now, cotton in itself is quite a pure form of cellulose, probably about 90%. So in order to extract the cellulose from the cotton, there's very little processing involved, so the fibres remain quite strong and robust. Rag paper comes in a variety of colours, weights and textures, and working out which one to use for your particular project can be a bit overwhelming at first. So I thought we'd just go through a few of the basic characteristics of a rag paper to start with. When you first look at these papers, you'll notice that they have a rough edge. These are what are known as the decals, which are formed in the sheet when the paper is made due to the mould that the sheet is formed in. If you get your nose up into the corners of the paper, you'll notice an insignia or a logo. This is what's called a watermark, and it identifies the mill or the manufacturer of the paper. Like the decal, the watermark is formed in the sheet when it's made. And while we're here, I want you to look at the surface texture of the paper. This is what is often referred to as the tooth of the paper. Now, let's talk about the weight of paper. The weight of paper is described in terms of grams per square metre, or what you'll see written as GSM. Now, most rag paper will vary somewhere between, say, 180 to 350 grams per square metre. So to put that in context for you, a piece of copying paper here will weigh approximately between 70 and 80 grams per square metre. So what rag paper do you use when you come to print? Well, that's generally dictated by the printmaking medium you're using and also the amount of pressure you're going to be applying. Relief prints, stencil prints and planar graphic prints require very little pressure when it comes to print, so you want a fairly lightweight paper, anywhere between 200 and 300 GSM. You'll also want a paper which is a little bit rigid and also has a fairly smooth tooth or minimal surface texture, whereas with intaglio printing, you actually want a much heavier weight paper because you're going to be applying a lot of pressure. And I also prefer a slightly softer paper. Bear in mind, these are not hard and fast rules. They're my personal preferences. You can print lino on a very heavyweight paper, which also is heavily textured. But if you follow these basic guides, you'll find getting a really good impression is much easier. Before we move on, there's another type of paper I do want to mention, because you'll find it used in a lot of fine art printmaking studios. This paper is washi, or Japanese paper. Washi is generally a lot lighter weight than rag paper, but don't be put off by this, because pound for pound, it's actually a lot stronger than rag paper, just because of what the paper fibres are composed of and how those fibres are prepared. Now, I do want to clarify one thing here. Quite often you'll see it referred to or sold as rice paper. Washi doesn't contain any rice fibres. It's normally composed of either 3 base fibres: kozo, gampi or mitsumata. Now, as strong as rag paper and washi are, they're still paper, so they need to be handled with care to ensure the longevity and value of your artwork. We need to try and minimise direct contact with the paper. Make paper or acetate tweezers that act as a barrier when you're handling the paper. You've also probably noticed that when I'm handling the paper, I'm not pinching the paper between my thumb and index finger, as this can damage some papers by forming a crease in it. I try to grip the paper between index finger and middle finger, as holding the paper like this exerts very little pressure and it also spreads the load. When you're handling a large sheet, hold it from opposing corners and allow the weight of the paper to naturally arch between your hands. This will reduce the chance of creasing, which will damage the paper. Now, you may not need a full sheet of paper to print on. Maybe you'll want a fraction of the size, so we're going to have to tear it down. I start off by marking the dimensions of my sheet down on the back of the paper using a graphite pencil. Please don't use any pens or markers on your printing paper, as the ink will travel through the paper and ruin your work. I'll then position my ruler over the marks, grab the paper in my right hand and begin to tear the paper over the ruler by bringing my right hand towards my left shoulder. Now, I won't be able to tear the paper in one go, so I'll stop and reposition my left hand and proceed to tear the paper again. So you can see the tear has created a softened edge, much like the original decal. I'll prepare all my paper in the same way, then I'll cover it and put it away till I'm ready to print. So now that my paper's ready, the next step is I have to get my ink ready and my block rolled up. But that's for the next video, so until then, take care and I'll see you then.